We're going to do a little bit of a demonstration on how to basically do the steps in your first assessment, which is to create an animated product shot for Lipton iced tea. What I'm going to start with doing is doing a little bit of research into what Lipton's ads currently look like, and particularly how any text is kind of described. So as you can see here, they use very high colors. It has very much like a kind of tropical sort of feel, very summery, that kind of vibe. Just seeing if there's any slogans that we can use as something to play with. Okay, get refreshed naturally. That's kind of easy to work with. Surprisingly refreshing and tasty. Join the iced tea evolution. You get it? That's right.
You should have that now. It's two separate emails.
Yeah, awesome. Did you normally have like a particular text that you work with? It's probably in the brief, isn't it?
It just said
take a break or something.
take a break with and then the bottle.
There you go. Take a break with, and then we'll have the bottle. So
Yeah, the assets should still be on the server.
all I could see was your bottle, and that's someone looking in the wrong folder, and that background.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's enough to. That's all I used.
Okay, yeah.
There's one that I gave to everybody.
Yeah. So then the text they'll just have to generate themselves.
Yeah, it's
cool.
it's After Effects text.
Yeah.
Some sort of preset.
Oh,
So
yeah.
then the second part of so we all do that together.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Cool.
create a 3D camera, do 3D layers, lights.
Yeah.
this one.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then when they find their own background,
Yeah.
3 different backgrounds,
Oh,
and
okay.
create 3 different style frames.
Yeah.
You choose them with them,
Yeah.
and then make that into the
Yeah.
animation.
So this one here is just
I provide
for
that.
the tutorial.
Yeah, just for tutorial, but
Yeah.
they then come up with at least 3 different ones.
Okay.
Depending on time,
Yeah. Cool.
3
Awesome.
different style frames.
All right. Did everyone get that? No, we'll give you the brief today, which
Okay,
we'll have. Exactly. So yeah. So I'll just continue the demonstration with this background and the bottle here. So the process for doing motion graphics when you're working with a client, you don't want to do spend hours of time animating something, send it to your client, and then the client goes, "Oh, I don't like that design, or I don't like that background, or I don't like, the text." Usually, the process is you get the work kind of approved as a static piece of artwork first, and the best tool to do that is actually Photoshop, because you can basically get your layers organized. Make it look right, and then you can then bring that into After Effects and then start animating. But before we get to that stage, we want to basically get approval from the client to say that, yes, I like how that looks. Go ahead and animate it, and you get them to sign off either via email or an actual document. Does that make sense? So that you don't sort of end up wasting your time or their time, and then slipping up on your deadline. So first thing to do is copy that folder that I showed you to your computer. Here's the background. Remember the dimensions for HD are 1920 by 1080. I'm going to have a look and see what this one is. There you go. It's already been made the right dimensions. 1920. Oh, there you go. That's not correct. 1920 should be by 1080. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to use the image canvas size tool to actually change the dimensions to 1920 by 1080. The reason why I don't use image size is because that's going to squash it, and we don't want to distort anything in the picture. We want to crop it, if anything. And if you go the default options, it's going to take a little bit off the top, a little bit off the bottom, but now that's in the correct ratio to go to broadcast. If you're not if you might forget that, just maybe write it down. Again, that number is 1920 by 1080, which is high definition. Now, the other assets that we have are that bottle. So I'm just going to go to File, Place, Embedded, and then use this file there, the PSD. Because it's actually a Photoshop file, it's already been deep etched, which is the technical term for cutout. So it originally comes up with a box that you can resize it. It is important to get it the right size first. If you're not sure, leave it large so you don't lose quality, but I'm going to maybe keep it about that size. You can hit the tick or just hit enter, and then it's there. So now this, as you can see in the layers, sits on its layer above, and I can move that around. And that's important because I want to be able to animate that later in After Effects. So other assets that you might need, bit of text. So text can either be done in Photoshop or in After Effects. There's pros and cons to both methods. From what I just gathered from that conversation with Mark, is they did all the text in hi. How are you?
Just got mentioned in our meetings.
Been invaded. Yeah, no worries. Here it is. What we're going to do is do it in Photoshop, just because it'll give us a bit more flexibility. So let's go into the text tool and create a bit of text. How about take a break? Take a break with ... and then logically, Lipton iced tea will be over to the right. I'm actually thinking it might be good to actually have the beach on the left-hand side just to balance things. So what I'm going to do is select my background. If you see this little padlock there, it's really annoying, but that's just what happens when you open up a JPEG in Photoshop. It means you can't edit it. So what I'm going to do is just get rid of that little padlock, just dragging it to the trash. Now I'm actually free to flip that layer. So I'm just going to go to Image, and then I'm going to go to, where is it? Oh, sorry, Edit, Transform, and just flip horizontal. There you go. So now the bottle looks a little bit more balanced on the right-hand side. Does that make sense? Does that look better? Yeah, okay. And then now the text can go here. Do you think the text looks readable enough? No. What do you suggest? Yeah, how about we make it, white to begin with? Yeah, better? More better? One thing you can, so different ways to resize text. You can select the text, you can go up here and change the size of it. You can use the up and down arrows to change it like that as well. Or you can actually scale the layer itself. Command T and then hold down Shift and drag the corners, that resizes. If you hold down Shift and Option, it resizes from the center. I just usually hit another tool just to commit those changes. It's still looking pretty plain, in my opinion. Like, this is an ad for Lipton iced tea. They're a pretty big company. They're going to have high expectations. They're going to want it to have a bit more impact. Let's have a look at other things they've done as well. As you can see, they use a lot of layer effects, so like a stroke and an outer glow. Let's play with something like that. And let's try to use a more playful font than that. One thing you can do is just select the font up here and just scroll through all of the fonts. A nice little trick you can try is just by clicking on the text, the name of the font, and just use the up and down arrows to toggle between fonts. That's kind of a little bit more in that style. If you just keep scrolling up and down, you'll eventually find a font, hopefully that looks correct, looks right. That's pretty good too. Bradley Hand. We might come back to that one. We kind of want it to be really sort of almost like a brush script like this to keep it in line. Obviously, if you were doing this for a real client, you would actually contact them and say, can you please send me a copy of your standard fonts. Yeah, actually that looks pretty good. Again, we want it to be as readable as possible, so we might actually have a go at applying maybe seeing if a bold might look a bit better. What do you think? Better? Yeah? And then the other thing you can try is layer styles. Has anyone played with layer styles in Photoshop before? No. Okay, so layer styles is where you can have a bit of fun with things. So if you go to your layer, and then you go to, where is it? The easiest way to do it in, there you go, layer styles, and you've got all the different ones there. The other option is you can, under your layers, just double click over on the right hand side here, and it also brings up the layer style dialog box. And that's probably good because you can actually play with it while it's still on the screen. So let's show you some of these. So this top one here, bevel and emboss, it kind of gives it like a metallic look. And you can play with, the strength of it. The fill opacity versus if you click on the word bevel and emboss, you can actually change, the strength of that beveling effect. A stroke, as I was saying, gives you an outline, which is a really handy technique. We might try, what sort of stroke do they use here? They use actually a blue colored stroke. So let's try replicating that. That may not work against the sunset though. So maybe let's try the orange color instead. And there you go. And by default, it works on the inside of the font, which actually isn't good in this case. But if we change position to outside, it kind of does that effect that they've done here in the Lipton ad. Can you see that? So that's pretty cool. Maybe play with a bit of that. Other effects, shadows you can play with. In a shadow, it's not great working on such a small size text, but you can see that kind of gives it almost like a 3D feel as well. They haven't used that in their branding. As you can see, it's quite flat, but if you wanted to give it a little bit of a 3D feel, you could use an inner shadow. An inner glow is kind of similar, but it just sort of makes it glow from the inside, as you might expect. Obviously, a white glow isn't going to be visible. It's going to make it green so you can see it. So the size is what you probably want to play with, and make it start on the center. Opacity. Oh, sorry, quality jitter. It's not really doing a lot, this inner glow. Possibly because it's on a white text. Satin kind of gives it this sort of overlaid kind of feel. It kind of sometimes gives it a bit of a shimmery. You can change the blending modes here, which just basically changes how it interacts. It's fairly subtle. Color overlay is pretty self-explanatory. Just overlays the layer with a color, a flat color. Gradients are fun. The one that I quite often use is an outer glow. Outer glow. So if you choose the same sort of color, you can basically make it look like the text is glowing, like that. Can you see that? That's pretty effective. You can just check that on and off to see if it's working. I personally think that that's not bad. It kind of gives the text the feel that it's kind of, reflecting and shining bright lights into the camera. And of course there's a drop shadow as well. So drop shadows are a good way to make text stand out as well. I'll just turn the glow off so you can see what it's doing. And what you want to play with is the size and the spread. So the spread makes the shadow spread over a larger area. The size is actually the size of the light source. The smaller the size of the light source, I just offset the distance. The harder the shadow, the larger the light source, the softer the shadow. So you kind of just play with those until it looks right. And obviously the distance is the distance of the light source to the object. And you can change the angle like so. In this case, we won't use a drop shadow. I don't think we need it. The outer glow I didn't mind, but maybe I'll just sort of bring that back a touch. The cool thing about these layer effects is that when you do bring them into After Effects, you can actually animate them as long as you import them in the right way. So there you go. What do you think? Do you think my client would be happy with this artwork? Don't all answer at once. Yeah. You're a tough crowd, you guys. What do I need to do to impress you more? Maybe put a shadow underneath this bottle so that it looks... or maybe a glow so that it looks like it's not actually floating on the water. What what you can do with your layer styles is you can actually duplicate them. So if you hold down the Option key, you can drag, say, the outer glow. Did that work? Outer glow to the bottle. There you go. So there's my glow there. And you can also bring the stroke, not that you would want to do that, but if you wanted to, there it is. Don't want to do that. So what do you think? Is that better? No? You're a tough crowd. How about we put a drop shadow on it, like I was talking about underneath. So if we double click here again, we can add a drop shadow. There it is, drop shadow, and we'll make it quite far and quite large so that it's quite subtle. Does that help? Not really. Maybe with the glow we can play with the type of glow, make it a little bit bigger and sort of softer. And you can just drop the opacity a little bit. And yeah, what we could do is maybe just in After Effects kind of, fly that in. Like, slide it in or make it spin. Or maybe it could come out of the water. Like a little Loch Ness monster. Anyway, what you could do is just, if you're happy with it, save it, show it to me, and I can then give you approval then to move on. What Mark's just said is what we normally get students to do is show 3 different style frames. So this is what we call a style frame, by the way. A style frame is basically like a static proof. And if everyone's happy with that, then you then move on to to the next stage. But yeah, make sure you produce 3 different concepts. So what he said is you need to source 3 different backgrounds. For the purposes of this assessment, I don't mind if you just rip stuff off. Just make sure that you kind of credit them if you can, like maybe in your assessment sheet, just say where you got that background from. Obviously, if you were doing this for a real job, you wouldn't just steal people's work. If you did want to get something that's already pre-made, what you can do when you get into doing your own work is you can use stock image libraries. Has anyone done that before? You know about them? Yeah. So do you want to tell us about what a stock image library is? Oh yeah, there you go. Good definition. Yeah. Exactly. So you can pretty much find anything on here. Let's try even iced tea. And you can basically find images that people have taken that are available for use. So say you wanted to use, this is the product shot, and then add a Lipton iced tea bottle in there. You could do that. You just have to pay Shutterstock a certain fee to use that. And I guess the bigger you use it, the more you pay, and the more you circulate it. Like internet versus print, you pay more or less. But then what happens is then Shutterstock pays a royalty or a portion of that fee to the artist who took that photo. Does that make sense? And then you get a version without this watermark on it. Quite often what graphic designers will do is they'll actually use the watermarked version in their proofs and then once the client signs off, then they'll buy the artwork rather than buying stuff that doesn't get used. Make sense? Cool. All right, so let's save this. And what I'm going to do is create a folder and call it Creative. This is what a lot of agencies do. And then make a folder called PSD. And what I'm going to do is call it Lipton add style frame V1 for version 1. And then hit OK. Then that's ready to bring into After Effects. Do you want me to now bring that into After Effects and do a bit of a demo on that? Yeah? Okay, so let's open up After Effects. We're going to let's start a new project. And when it comes up with the dialog box, Oh no, it's just empty. So let's save this. Hi, Steph.
Hi.
And again, under Creative, look at a creative folder called AE, After Effects. And we're going to call this Lipton Add Animations. Hit save. And then we're going to import that Photoshop file that we just made. So go back to Creative, PSD, there it is. Click Open. Now before you click on OK, just check the settings. This is really important if you want those layer styles to be there and all the different layers. Rather than the default option, which is footage and merge layers, change that to composition, retain layer sizes, and make sure that your layer options keep the editable layer styles. Okay. If you forget, just go through the tutorial and you can watch where I've said that. Now, what you should have is a composition here, which you can just double click. You've got all your layers intact. One thing I did forget to say is you should name your layers logically in Photoshop because they'll get carried on through the project. When you guys get into the industry, you might find that you'll design the artwork, somebody else animates it, or vice versa. So naming your layers correctly and not having a big mess for the next person to deal with is really important. Okay, so here's my layers. As you can see, the layer styles are actually editable, so I can actually turn them on and off. I can even animate those effects. So if I want the glow to happen when it comes to a rest, I can do that. Let's have a go at animating this. We're going to do two types of animation. One where the text doesn't type on, and we're going to do another one which uses layer presets animation presets to make the text type on in a kind of a nifty way. But just this will be a bit of a refresh from last week as well. I'll be kind of going over some of the similar techniques. So again, my approach is I usually work backwards. So basically move my time indicator to where I want the animation to stop. And generally speaking, I find 1 second is more than enough time. If it happens over too long a time, it gets quite boring. So let's try a 1 second animation. What I'm going to do is decide what I want to do. So maybe maybe what could happen is the camera can sort of be zooming out of this beautiful background, and then the text can sort of just fly in, and the bottle can sort of maybe rise up from the bottom as if it's like come out of the water. Should we give that a go? So what I'm going to do is try this as a 3D project. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Camera, and hit OK. What I'm going to do is show you how Andrew Kramer used the track tool to basically move in and out. Nothing's happening. Why? Because I have to make sure that I undid that by accident. You have to make sure that your layers have the 3D toggle turned on. Okay, once you've got them turned on, when you move the camera back and forth, everything moves. And not only that, you can actually manipulate these objects in 3D space by moving them forwards and backwards as well. Okay, as you can see, that's not scaling, it's actually flying past the camera as I track it on the Z-axis. So that's going to be fun. We can play with that. But to begin with, because we want it to finish in this position, what I'm going to do is select all my layers. I'm going to hit P for position, and I'm going to just hit the stopwatch on all of them. That basically sets my end point, and that's where we're going to come to a rest. While I'm here, I might actually right click and go to Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. So that turns all those little keyframes into these little hourglasses, which makes sure that we have a nice smooth stop. What else shall we do? Maybe if we're thinking about doing some rotation, I might hit the R key, and that brings up all my rotation elements, and I'm just going to stopwatch everything just to make sure that it finishes in that position at the end as well. Okay, cool. So that's basically where we're going to end up. Now if I rewind, now whatever I do to anything in terms of position and rotation should automatically be recorded by After Effects. So if I were to say use my camera orbit tool, click and drag the mouse like forward, like I was saying, to start in here, if I just hit space or the 0 key on the numeric keypad, like this little key, not that key there, this one here, it'll do a RAM preview. It'll actually show me that animation. Okay, now if you don't want it to go all the way to the end of the timeline and come back and play again, you just bring that little marker there back into the area that you're interested in. Now when you hit the 0 key, it'll just play that segment back and forth. Okay, so you can see that little pushback is working. Is it amazing? I don't think so. I think I could do better. So now let's try and play with the position, the movement of our text and our bottle in 3D space. So again, I've already keyframed this. I'll just go back to the start. And what I'm going to do is click on my Lipton iced tea bottle, and I'm going to hit P for position. And I'm just going to zoom out a little bit on my canvas, Command minus. And now if I click on my position, if I look at my numbers here, that's telling me the X, Y, and Z axis. And if I drag the Z axis, you'll actually see that I'm moving that. Of course, you can also grab it by that little handle there, the little blue handle, but sometimes I find it easier just to drag it from here. So I'm just moving it so it's out of shot. I'll do the same thing with the text. P for position, drag the Z value back. And I might actually push it up as well, give it like a bit of Y movement, so now it's going to sort of fly down as well as across. So I've got my tea bottle sort of flying in like that, and my text layer kind of flying down like that. Okay, tap the 0 key, and let me just zoom in a bit more on that. So now you can see like they're actually moving in a 3D way. It's very subtle, and it's not actually much different, but it's there. Okay. What do you reckon? Do you think that's going to make my client happy with the $30,000 that they spent on this? Sorry? For sure. I'm not really convinced, but this is the best I can do under pressure. But no, let's try playing with something else. Maybe a bit of a rotation. So how about we take the tea bottle, hit R for rotation, and let's give it a bit of a semicircular kind of twist. So I'm just going to grab my Y rotation. Oh no, maybe not Y, maybe X. No, that's not great either. Yeah, maybe a little bit of a Z rotation. And I'm going to select those and go with an easy ease again. And then tap the 0 key. Oops. Let's zoom in. Tap the 0 key. And there you go. There's a little bit more of a dynamic motion happening. And the secret is to make it all happen at the same time so that everything feels very smooth and together, rather than this bit happening, then this bit happening, then that bit happening. It makes it feel very clunky. Cool. So you could be happy with that. I mentioned before there is a way to make the text type on in a nifty kind of way. So I'm going to show you that. They're called animation presets, but one thing that you'll need to do before you do that is convert this layer back to editable text. Okay, so that's this layer here. At the moment, I won't be able to actually apply this type of animation to it because After Effects just thinks of it as one object rather than individual letters. So to fix that, we can right-click on it, hopefully, and then select Convert to Editable Text. Okay, if I click on that, now all the layer styles happen there, but you'll notice the little icon changes from being a Photoshop layer to a text icon, and it means that I can actually go in there with the text tool and edit that text if I wanted to. But more importantly, at this stage, I can actually do this little typewriter type animation. Now, I'm going to be wasting my time if it starts out here because you're not even seeing it. I'm going to wait till the text would be in shot, and then I'm going to start my text animation there. Okay, so to do this, select the text, go to Animation, go to Browse Presets, and you get it launches a program called Adobe Bridge, and it's going to show us a whole bunch of pre-made text presets. So you're going to go into Text, double click, go to Animate In, and you can see all these animations which start kind of getting previewed here. on the right hand side. Some of them are really cheesy, like that one. Some of them are a little bit more subtle, like that one. Some of them are very specific, like that one. Like that would be good for like an intro title to a sci-fi film, probably. Has anyone seen the movie Matrix?
Yeah.
You can make your text rain in code, like the Matrix does. That's pretty cool. Something like that might be okay. Something that's a little bit nifty, but not too over the top. That's nice too, kind of subtle. But for the purposes of this this tutorial, how about we try which one? Maybe this one, because it's kind of smooth. Oh, what's this? Okay, had some sort of error message, but it seems to be okay. So I'm just going to tap the 0 key, and let's see what happens. Okay, so it's doing it, but what's the problem with it? Too slow. Okay, so how do we fix that? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to show you. If you open up your text layer, hit the downward arrow. By default, when you open things up, it'll actually show you any keyframes that are hidden as circles. Okay, so if you keep breaking it down, you'll actually get to a point where those circles turn into diamonds or hourglasses, and that's when you can actually get to keyframes that you can animate. So what I'll do is just bring that up here. All I need to do to make that happen faster is make sure that everything is fully expanded. Then I just select all my keyframes, and then I can't drag it, but what I can do is select them all and hold down the Option key and drag the right side in. And can you see how it basically makes it happen in less time? Does that make sense? So now if I hit the 0 key, that should happen much quicker. Better? Are you happy with that? Or should we make it all finish at the same time? Let's try making it all finish at that same time. So let's select it all. And then I'm going to maybe make the animation start a little bit sooner, and then hold down the Option key and then make that finish at that 1 second mark so that it all neatly finishes at the same time. Okay, again, let's just ramp preview that. What do you reckon? Better? Perfect? It's not done unless it's perfect. So there you go. Another thing you can try is probably like animating that little glow effect that we talked about before. So maybe changing the layer styles here. So if you go to a layer styles, you'll be able to see that there's that outer glow that we've set in Photoshop before. Just to be a little bit more fancy, we might actually make the glow happen just as we might make it sort of highlight just as it kind of comes to a close. So what we'll do is we'll keyframe the size and the spread and maybe the opacity, and then as it kind of comes to the finishing of that animation, we'll just make it go full-on glow, like that. There you go. I just dragged the size, and then what we'll do is as the title continues on, we'll just let that gradually fade back to kind of where it was before. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Okay, maybe that needs to fade off a lot quicker. What do you think? Maybe a little bit slower than that. Cool. Alright, so I think I've shown you probably enough little techniques for now. I'm just going to close off this tutorial, and I'll let you guys have a play, and I'll come around and give you guys help if you need it.